You ever have a moment where you're playing a game and it feels so raw, so real? You can almost feel the sun beating down on your face. You can feel the woods and vegetation around you as they blow back and forth in the wind. Some games are able to nail this, but I would argue and say not many games nail it as good as Dragon's Dogma 2. This is one of the most beautiful games I've ever played. Not only is it one of the most beautiful games I've ever played, gameplay-wise, it's one of the best I've ever experienced in an RPG. And when you're in the middle of battle and you're driving your daggers into an enemy and you see yourself tearing away the flesh of your opponent, or you're slamming your big sword with so much force that it literally shatters the ground beneath you, breaking the skull of some great enemy in one blow, dude, I would be hard pressed to point to another game that gives me this level of realism. The only issue here is for some reason, Capcom thought that it was okay to make this game very CPU dependent, which means unless you got a beefed up PC, you're not gonna be able to enjoy at least what I got to enjoy. And that's a shame because I got to experience a beautiful game with wonderful gameplay set in a mesmerizing world that captivated me for a little over 40 hours. Now the developers have come out and said that they're gonna be addressing a lot of these issues, so hopefully this gets fixed soon. I do sit back and wonder why it is this game is so CPU dependent. But make no mistake, guys, if you got the rig to handle this game, it is a beautiful game. This is a true open world game from start to finish, and it is a sizable world that, by the way, gets even bigger when you enter the second stage of the campaign, which is what I call the Endgame. This is where things really get crazy. And yes, we'll be talking about New Game Plus as well. So again, there will be spoilers in today's video. With that being said though, let's begin our review of one of the most anticipated games of 2024, Dragon's Dogma 2. First, I'm going to open up with the story of this game. That's really the hook here. The main story kicks off with what initially seems like you, the Arisen, taking the seat on the Draken throne. Looks pretty good, huh? Not many times we actually start at the very tippity top. Everyone's cheering for us, calling us your majesty. We're royalty, baby. Except we're not. The real Arisen, you, are actually in prison. Dude, something about RPGs always start off with the main character in prison, right? Conveniently, our memory has been erased and we're forced to work until we're dead. However, in the middle of prison, Medusa breaks out and starts going crazy, killing everybody. We find a sword, we help drive away Medusa, and then we take off running. Now, this is a pretty cool moment. We go for the leap, the jump. You think we're dead? Think again. Buckbeak saves us until he's eventually shot down for no damn reason. And I love how there's no issues, by the way, with shooting down this beautiful, majestic beast that just saved our life. We're just like, okay, hi, you got a quest for me? Eventually though, we're reminded that we are the Arisen. And essentially we had challenged a dragon and then proceeded to beat the piss out of us and eat our heart right in front of the love of our life. Don't worry, we're gonna get into that in just a moment. But this main quest of hunting the dragon that killed you is essentially the exact main plot of the first Dragon's Dogma. Matter of fact, from my editor Jared, who played the first Dragon's Dogma, there is a lot of parallels here to the first game and the second game's overall main storyline. Now, let me just say, based on RPGs that I've previously played, I have some issues with the main storyline. Matter of fact, the overall questing inside of Dragon's Dogma could be better, but I think it's something that I know most Dragon Dogma players already expected. At least when talking to Jared, this is pretty much right up what Dragon's Dogma 1 was very much like. But this is 2024, and we just came off the back of Baldur's Gate 3 last year, and I know some of you are gonna be like, Cross, you can't compare every RPG to Baldur's Gate 3. Listen, why not? I'm just saying, why not? I love deep RPG mechanics. I love that every decision has a consequence. And I'm not saying that there aren't consequences in Dragon's Dogma 2. But let me just give you an example. And again, spoiler here. But there was a moment in the end of times where I'm talking to Sven, who is the beloved son of Queen Disa, and also the next in line to become ruler. And essentially the entire political struggle here in this game and why you, the true Arisen, are not sitting on the throne is because Queen Disa wants her son to be king. And she has essentially put in place a fake Arisen who actually has a scar on their chest to make it look real, like they themselves are the Arisen. Listen, fellas, I am all about this. You give me some Game of Thrones settings, some poisoning, some backstabbings with a splash of incest, I'm in, baby. Hence why I love Game of Thrones. It's spicy. But this main story, guys, really wasn't that spicy. Like for a moment there, I was like, oh yes, now we're talking. Things are about to get juicy. But let me just give you an example of a moment where consequences really didn't matter. I'm talking to Sven, and he's saying, hey, I would love to evacuate the citizens, but I can't leave my mother. I love mom, and if she's gonna stay in and die, I'm gonna stay and die. So diplomatically, I proceeded to Queen Deesa's room, which by the way, is really odd how we can just walk in and out of these royal quarters without any of the guards being like, hey, you probably shouldn't be armed. But hey, whatever. It's Dragon's Dogma, I'm fine. I proceeded to pick up my sword, charge it, and kill the piss out of the queen. Don't worry guys, I put her in bed, but she is absolutely dead. I proceeded to walk just 2 rooms over, back to Sven, who proceeds to be very upset with me that I killed his mother, rightfully so, for then just 2 sentences later going, all right, I guess I'm gonna go with you. To then suddenly saying, hey, can you escort me to this point of safety on the map, which made no sense whatsoever? I proceeded to take him to that point. We have a bonding experience. And then at the end of it, he proceeds to thank me, give me flowers, and tell me that he will remember me and all the ways in which I have helped him. Now listen, I'm not trying to say that I didn't play a pivotal role in Sven's life, but dude, I just killed his mom in cold blood. And within a matter of like a day, in-game time, by the way, he's good. Now my Dragon Dogma lovers, you're gonna say, but Cross, Sven knew how his mother was. Listen, all right, sure. But let's be real about this. The selling points for Dragon's Dogma 2 is definitely not its storyline. There was no really crazy side quests that I embarked on that I was like, wow, this really changed my life. I didn't have that Thieves Guild moment where it was like, oh my God, that guy was dirty this whole time? And the reason why I bring this up is because even though I haven't played Skyrim and the Thieves Guild in years, I remember those storylines. I remember moments in Baldur's Gate 3 where there were repercussions for who I killed. We talked about it when we talked about BG3 last year. I killed a village in a rage, thought it was funny as hell. Turns out I needed those people, which resulted in me getting smacked down by the boss so bad that I had to go back to a save point, erasing an entire day's progress just because in a blinding rage, I killed the wrong people. That is not present in Dragon's Dogma 2. Again, beautiful game, great gameplay, and we're gonna get into Vocations in just a moment. But if you're expecting some challenging narrative that's gonna leave you perplexed, that's gonna push you to ask the question of whether or not you made the right or wrong decision, that's not this kind of game. Now, that's not to say that you can't go out there, kill somebody, and that messes up a storyline. Now, before we get into the ending of the game, especially the true ending that everybody is calling it, although in my opinion, it's really the only ending, let's now talk about the world. Again, I talked about how beautiful this game is, and yes, dude, I'm just saying, guys, if you got the right rig, this is by no means a Starforge ad, but if you got the right rig, this game, in my opinion, is second to none. It is a beautiful game. And there's no zoning here. Again, I love Final Fantasy 16, but things are broken up into zones. This is a true open world game. And from what I've heard, this was also a big selling point for Dragon's Dogma 1, was exploring this open world. Now, funny enough, the world doesn't really beg you to explore it. You kind of got to just figure it out. Like, there's no like little quest icons or things that pop up that says, hey, come click me or come after me. The only thing you really get is your pawns. One of them will say, hey, there's a chest over here or something, and you can follow them to that chest or go with them along a path to reach a cave. You've got a mini map, and as you get later into the end game, you'll be able to pick up pawns that have the abilities to reveal literally every map icon on the map, which can show you resource points, which by the way, are extremely convenient if you're farming for in-game materials. But let me just say, the world of Dragon's Dogma doesn't have to beg you to explore it. You'll have no problem doing that on your own. Now, what I also love about exploring the world in this game is that it changes drastically, whether it's daytime or nighttime. When it's nighttime, the frequency of ads are much higher, and not only are they much higher, but you just have more dangerous ads. And some of these don't even spawn unless it's nighttime. I fought this like big skeleton boss that was this mage and was hell to kill, but this boss would only spawn at nights. And I would say early game, wandering around during the nighttime is quite dangerous, guys. And that's another thing about Dragon's Dogma. It will humble you very quickly. You may be like, yo, I got this. I can handle it. And the next thing you know it, your entire squad is getting ate up by a pack of wolves and dry humped by a squad of goblins. And dude, it can happen that quick. Now, throughout the world, there are a number of chests, secret tokens that you can interact with and pick up. Lots of things that you can pick up from the ground that, by the way, you can combine into potions and other things. You've got side locations, spawn points for these like mini bosses that are spread around the map. And from what the developer said, the map of Dragon's Dogma 2 is 4 times as large as the original game. So for my people that played Dragon's Dogma 1, this may just give you an idea of the scale of this game. Now again, more spoilers on this, but the map that you see in the regular world is big enough on its own. But in the end of times, when you enter the second portion of the game, the sea actually disappears. So you can't swim in this game, guys, or go anywhere in the water because this brine comes up and kills you. And there's actually a narrative narrative reason for that we'll get into it a bit more. But what's so amazing though is that this map becomes larger. Suddenly you find yourself walking around on the seafloor. And dude, in this next world, the ads are insane. Everything here can kill you so fast, which means you and your squad have got to be ready. Which takes us to one of the coolest things about Dragon's Dogma 2, pawns. Pawns serve you because you are the Arisen. And you can actually pick up pawns randomly who actually will approach you even if you're out and about, or you can actually go here to these rimstones. Now these rimstones are really cool because when you interact with them, you can pull up unique pawns. For instance, if I wanted to pull up your pawn, if I have your pawn's ID, their name, I can type that in, pull them up, summon them to my squad, and then add them to my squad. And this is really important because depending on the pawns, they could be substantially stronger than the other ones. They may have maxed out vocations, or they can have high level gear. All of these things contribute to that pawn being substantially deadlier than their peers. And finding that right pawn, which you don't really need to get too hung up on because I traded them out a bunch, but finding the right set of pawns that works well within your group will make all the difference. I actually ended up beating the game by having myself as a warrior vocation. I had a fighter who would tank things, a thief who was just an absolute beast, and my pawn here, my main pawn, is Les, who stayed as a mage and would just do heals all the time. But dude, there's all kinds of things you can do to synergize, and maybe there are different loadouts that are even better. If you want a squad full of thieves, go right ahead. You want to do all fighters? By all means, try it. You want a squad full of tricksters? Good luck! But I do love that it has that level of freedom when choosing vocations between yourself and your main pawn. Again, you pick up other pawns, but you have your main pawn. And that main pawn is the one that you can actually loan out to other people's teams. You can set up pawn quests. You can gear them up, give them good weapons, give them good items, and make them an absolute beast. And the way I had my main pawn set up, Les literally just walked around, healed me all the time, and the rest of the time he just died because that's all Les does. Dies all the time. Dude, it got so bad that I literally had to get a second pawn that was a healer so I can double up on heals. Les always healed himself before healing anyone else. And by the way, this is not actually Les I'm playing with. This is AI Les. This is just a bot version of Les. It was actually funny because so many people were coming by the stream asking me, hey, are you actually playing with Les? No, this is just the name I gave to my main pawn. Now, as you continue to explore the world with your pawns, you continue to come across more and more dangerous enemies. And at any moment you need to heal. You can pop things like healing potions, you can eat food, or you can actually camp. Now, the camping feature is pretty cool because when you camp, you want to clear out the entire area before camping. If you don't, you risk getting attacked in the middle of the night, which makes complete sense. Now, there's also a cooking feature while you're camping. It's interesting because you can only cook one item at a time, and when you cook, it's a cutscene of literally someone actually cooking delicious slabs of meat, which I'm not entirely against. Look, I know it's IRL, but it looks good. But I do find it interesting that you can only cook just once at your campfire and not multiple times. But when you're fully rested, which is important, you and your squad will have their health fully back, and also you will be fully rested, which makes a big deal when it comes to your pawn's efficacy and your own abilities. And by the way, this is extremely vital because if you look down at your health gauge, you'll notice the gray portion of your health, that lowers when you take damage. And the only way to really recuperate that health bar all the way back to full is if you either rest or you die and use a stone to resurrect yourself. Overall, guys, exploring the world though will pull you in multiple directions. Yes, it is one of those kind of games where you can get off the beaten path very quickly and find yourself getting lost, exploring things, finding things, and even doing side quests. Now, like I mentioned earlier, there are no icons for things. It's not like you're gonna come across a guy that has a side quest icon over their head and you know, hey, this is where I go to start and initiate this quest. You just gotta talk to people. If they don't approach you first, you gotta go out of your way and talk to them. And there's some crazy quests out there. I was watching one guy, and turns out the quest didn't start until he bought an item from somebody. And the moment he bought that item, boom, side quest began. And this is interesting because most RPG games, like, they want you to get every single quest possible. They want you to have all those experiences. Whereas Dragon's Dogma 2, again, why I mentioned it feels very raw and also real is because it doesn't break that. There's nothing there that's holding your hand to go find that quest. Some of you will either love that, some of you may even dislike it. And I will say, quests in this game will leave you perplexed at times because you'll be wondering, what the hell? What do I even do? And this happened a few times for me. And sometimes it's literally just letting time pass. Go to an inn, sit down, let some time pass, and boom, the next quest step will reveal itself. And the game is not without bugs in the questing department. You'll have a pawn that's literally leading you to the next step of a quest. Then you'll find yourself in a fight with a bunch of enemies. And then after that, your pawn just has amnesia. They like don't remember what the hell they were doing, which means you need to go back into your quest menu, unselect it, reselect it, and then that'll get you going. Now, considering how big this world is, you're bouncing back and forth between quests, and you're traveling and exploring all over the place, surely there's a good means of traversal. Well, not really. You've got ox carts, which does save you time, but there are only set points that those ox carts can actually travel to, so you can go from town to town. And then you have fairy stones, which you can use, and it's a one-time use to then teleport you to a port crystal you've discovered. Now, you actually have a port crystal you could take with you, so you can place this at a certain area if you want to go back. Now, the fairy stones, this is an interesting one. I've never seen this, but it's a one-time use, and the price of them is insane. 10,000 gold for one fairy stone. That means if you just finished the quest and you just need to walk back to town, you have to make the decision of whether or not you want to use a fairy stone to teleport yourself back, which again is 10,000 gold, or you just walk yourself back. I will say it was frustrating for me at first because I was like, dude, I feel like majority of the game I'm just walking everywhere. And I know that the purpose of this is really to get you to explore the world, but considering how many tasks are given to you and if you're doing a lot of different quests, it just feels like you're walking everywhere instead of actually just playing the game. Now, I will say the saving grace of this is as you get closer to the end of the game, fairy stones become extremely common, at least for me. I was getting them left and right, things I was looting, things I was killing. Fairy stones were just always popping up in my inventory, and so teleporting wasn't an issue. And this is a lifesaver because when you actually get into the end of times and the whole world looks like hell on earth, you cannot stop and camp and rest. One of the things that makes this world so much more dangerous than the previous is because you can't stop and rest. So therefore, if you wanted to actually replenish your health and your party's health, you can't do that. You actually have to teleport or go all the way back to a town and either A, stay at an inn, which by the way will cost you tons of money, or stay at a house, which still will cost you a lot of money, but in the long run is better bang for your buck. Now, warning here, in this realm, you'll have these like pink little circles that are placed in various locations on the map. If you rest for too long or too much time pass, those areas on the map get wiped out. So needless to say, in this end phase, it's extremely important to nail down all those areas, take on those big baddies, to save those areas and not rest too much in between, which means you have less time for you and your party to recover. In that same vein, this is also why port crystals are so important. Port crystals allows you to set your own teleportation crystal to go back and forth to. Now, all the main towns have their own port crystals, but having your own port crystal to place down anywhere can save you a lot of time. But this also takes us to microtransactions. Guys, I see both sides of the microtransaction debate. First up, this is what's in the store right now. Yes, it is a bunch of things. Everything from an explorer's camping kit to a heartfelt pendant to an outright port crystal to wake stones and rift crystals, which is the currency you use to actually purchase and hire pawns. I will say it is a bold thing for the developers to add this to a single player game. And I'm not sure if this existed in the first Dragon's Dogma game or not. Now, of course, when you break down each one of these items, it equals out to a little over $41. And then of course, there's a bundle of this, which is substantially cheaper. Now, you don't have to buy any of these things. Every one of these things you can acquire in-game, and you're going to acquire it anyways as you play the game. You'll have plenty of wake stones, especially once you get the item that actually reveals all the wake stones in your area. So you'll never run out. And on top of that, you'll be just fine as long as you don't die. Port crystal, you get one eventually. I'm not really sure how you get other ones, but I got one. It would have been nice to have more than one, but whatever. There's some other customizable things in here. But guys, this is not pay to win. At the same token, I completely understand why people look at this and think, what the hell? Why are there microtransactions in my single player campaign game? I get it. It's a terrible look. And to have outright items that you can get in game for sale for $1, $2, this to me is just not worth the negative publicity. Again, I know we're reviewing Dragon's Dogma right now, but in that same vein, we have to talk about everything. And that includes the microtransactions here. And I don't know how many people bought this bundle for $15. Look, perhaps it was a ton, but at the same time, I have to ask, how many new or potential new players did you drive away by having microtransactions front and center on your store? That's all I'm saying, guys. I'm loving the game. I'm enjoying the game, but I also think this is a bad look, and it gives ammunition to the folks that are already sitting on the sidelines ready to hate on the game. And as a reviewer, this actually kind of derails my review process because I really just want to focus on the core gameplay itself, the narrative, and we're going to continue on that journey right now. But microtransaction does play a role, especially when we start talking about port crystals and other items that I know many of you see for sale right there in the store. I don't like it. I don't think the extra money doesn't make up for the negative publicity. There's something to be said about having goodwill within the gaming community. And when people love your game, dude, they will shout it from the mountaintops. That word of mouth would net you so many more players. But that's it, guys. That's all I'm going to say about microtransactions. Let's continue. Now, one of the biggest hooks in this game is really the combat. Now, I got a lot of comments about the combat. So many people were coming out of the stream and saying, Cross, your gameplay looks so slow. Listen, it was slow because I'm literally playing the warrior vocation. Look, man, I like big swords and big hammers, and I like swinging them. And yes, this thing is slow as hell, but when it makes contact, fellas, it puts out. I'm talking massive damage. And if you play Monster Hunter, you're used to this, but there is a variety of different vocations. You've got archer, you've got thief, you've got mage, sorcerer, mystic spear, warrior, fighter. You even have a vocation called warfare, where despite it having lower base stats, allows you to use every weapon. Then you have things like magic archer, which is so cool. So again, I know a majority of my gameplay is like me rocking the big sword. Look, guys, that's just an identity thing. I just like being that guy. I want to swing the big hammer around, and when I make contact, every other hit or so, I wanted to do a hell of a lot of damage. I cannot stress, though, how good the gameplay is here. Like, every one of these classes offers something so unique. And when you start pairing it with different vocations in your squad, you really start to see how potent certain classes are with one another. Now, the beautiful thing about DD2 is that you're not locked to a vocation. You can choose and purchase other vocations. Others you'll have to discover, and some of them are just as easy as just presenting a weapon here at any vocation guild, and boom, you can now purchase that vocation. Now, everything that you're purchasing here is with a currency called DCP. This is not a hard currency to get. Again, it's just mainly you playing the game. Now, within each one of those vocations, you have weapon skills. You've got core skills, and then you have augments. Now, weapon skills are pretty straightforward. They're literally the things you're doing on the screen. Core skills are the things that specifically give you advantages within that class. And then augments are really cool because it's augments that you can carry over to other class. Now, what that means is that if I'm trying to perfect a certain build, I can take augments from one class and utilize them with another. For instance, I was wanting to be tankier as a warrior, so I proceeded to actually drag some of my fighter augments into my warrior vocation, choosing the ones that allow me to single-handedly tank enemies for my teammates, while also utilizing abilities within my weapon skill that aggroes enemies. It's little things like this, guys, that can make a build that you utilize in this game extremely unique. And not only can you do this for yourself, you can also do this for your main pawn. Take your main pawn, for instance. You can have your main pawn jump in, level up certain vocations, swap them to another vocation, and you can also drag those same augments and min-max to utilize certain builds. Again, where the quest line inside of Dragon's Dogma fell flat for me, just my opinion again, I feel like the story could have been better. The core gameplay here is excellent, arguably one of the best. I would be so hard-pressed to find combat as thrilling as the combat here, which takes me to the enemies that you'll be facing, which is the biggest selling point in this entire game. Initially, you'll be facing mainly like bandits, goblins, a few harpies here and there, but dude, later on, about middle of the game and beyond, the enemy types you go up against are insane. Everything from drakes, which are these dragons, which by the way, the first time I killed one of these drakes, took me like 30 minutes to kill. And that's because I sucked and I didn't realize how important it was to have at-level pawns. But dude, we got destroyed. But there's chimeras, golems, and it's so crazy because as you begin to deal with each one of these enemies, they have their own mechanics and quirks. And you want to have things that can actually help you against that certain enemy type. For instance, one of my pawns mentioned while we're fighting a dragon that, hey, we need to be utilizing frost. So the next time I dealt with a dragon, I made sure that my mage had the ability to give us a power-up which applied frost to all of our weapons, which made a big difference. Golems, for instance, have these little runes on their body that you have to target and hit. There's weak points on various different bosses that if you don't target, dude, you will get messed up. And on top of that, some of these guys will just bounce. For instance, a griffin will literally just fly away and you have to track it down, Monster Hunter style, find its nest, and hopefully finish them off. Now, what's so amazing is that you can actually climb on enemies. Like if this griffin is about to take off, dude, jump on it and ride. If your stamina will allow you to, you can ride her all the way down. And if you're bold enough, you can actually let go while on top of them and recoup some of that stamina. Or you can utilize a variety of different potions or combinations to get your stamina back. Guys, at first, I was getting wrecked by all of these. Pretty much everything I ran into immediately destroyed me. There was like one time we ran into a Minotaur and it wiped my entire team. But there is a turning point. As you begin to get stronger, unlock more and more of your vocation skills, and utilize those augments, guys, you become extremely powerful. I know a long time ago, there was like a post talking about the concern of enemy variety in Dragon's Dogma 2. Personally, I feel like the variety here is really good. And when you get into that next phase of this world, that in-game phase or the end of times phase, this opens up even more enemy types. There's like this one thing that held a blade. It was like this ghost looking thing, and it would literally just scream. And if you were around it, you just fell over. And I can't tell you how many times this guy almost wiped us. I literally dreaded when I ran into one of them. I was like, oh my God, I've got to take another one of these guys on. And again, like I said, it's that end of the world phase. So you don't want to rest often, because every time you rest, you're sacrificing more and more of the world. Now, the real way to really become powerful inside of Dragon's Dogma is in the weapons and armor. This scales greatly depending on where you go to buy certain things. And of course, at what point in the storyline you're at. Now, there is no crafting, at least from what I experienced inside of Dragon's Dogma 2. Essentially, you make money by killing things and doing quests and looting things. And then you take that money, you go to a store, and they have a number of different things you can buy. And depending on the location of the merchant, this can change the wares. Eventually, I made my way to Batal, and I got some really dope weapons. Then you take those weapons and those armor pieces and you upgrade them. You can actually upgrade them 3 times right here at the merchant. Now, each one of these upgrades substantially bump up those stats. But then there's a point beyond the 3rd upgrade. And this right here, guys, is where things get crazy. The 4th upgrade can only be done with the Dragon Forge. He's someone you're going to come across as you continue to do the story. But he's a merchant and a smithy that deals exclusively with Worm's Life crystals. Now, you get these crystals from defeating drakes in the game. And when you get to like the end world, you pretty much get them left and right. Like, it's so plentiful. But you take those crystals and you go to the Dragon Forge. And when you max out a piece of armor and a weapon, it substantially bumps up the stats. And on top of that, it cuts the weight down. Now, this is substantial because we have a stamina system and everything pretty much operates off of that stamina. And yes, your weight greatly affects your stamina consumption. A pain point in this game is you literally managing your weight constantly. But the beautiful thing is on that 4th upgrade, you drop the weight of your armor and your weapon down substantially, resulting in me as a warrior with heavy armor and a heavy weapon rocking a weight class of light. And the tiers here is what really dictates things from light to average to heavy to eventually being over encumbered. Now listen, I'm not a big fan of the weight system simply because there are so many things in this game that weigh too damn much. For instance, camping kits, for some reason, weigh a crap load, which means every time you pick up one, you're gonna at least bump yourself up 1 tier in the weight department, which means you're gonna have to go in your inventory and transfer stuff over to your main pawn or other pawns. As a matter of fact, you're gonna be doing that a lot because as you're out and about and you're looting things constantly, because that's what we do, we're scavengers as gamers, but all of this stuff builds up weight and you either have to go back to town to one of your homes and store some of this stuff, or of course, go to an inn and store it, or you play the inventory management minigame, which is just you transferring things to all your various pawns. Now, don't be concerned if one of your pawns dies, those items just go straight to storage. So you can transfer away. And again, none of the items that you give to those pawns that you've hired out from other realms or even from other arisen, those items don't go to that pawn. So you're good. Don't worry about losing those things. Now, there is a way for you to transfer things between you and other arisen, although indirectly. You can actually set up a pawn quest. This is a really cool feature. But essentially, guys, you can go in there and set a specific quest, whether it's for a badge or to get a certain kill, and then you can set a reward. And in some ways, you can like indirectly trade here. If you want to actually set up an item as a reward, and in the same token, you're requesting a certain item, someone can then pick up that quest. And as you're looking at different pawns, you can see their quests, and some of them are very rewarding. It's little things like this that in some ways allows for players to kind of reach across different realms and interact with one another, that being different arisen, which really does make me question, why wasn't this game co-op? Now, no, it's a single player game, and I love the single player experience, but the party system here seems perfect as a co-op game. And maybe there was like some limitations to why that couldn't happen. But can you imagine having a 4-man party of you and your friends, all rocking different vocations, all going into some dungeon or into some boss and tackling it together? Dude, if that came out for Dragon's Dogma as like a DLC or something, I would be all over it. I would easily replay this game from start to finish, every aspect 100% if I could play with some of my friends. And look, don't get me wrong, I love the banter with my pawns. It's funny listening to them. At one point, hilariously, one of the pawns stated that, hey, I've noticed that there's nothing but males in our squad. Does that speak to the Arisen's preference? Essentially just calling out that we have a sausage fest, which I thought was hilarious. Now, are you gonna get the same level of banter from like Baldur's Gate 3? No. There's no Asterion who's in the squad who's just oozing with sarcasm. I will say the voice acting was really good from these pawns, but nothing up that depth. There's no moment where Gale comes out and starts teaching you magic tricks from behind. That doesn't happen here. But at the same time, you can't fuck a bear. You know what I mean? Like, that's not in this game either. Baldur's Gate 3 is a whole other animal. But personally, when it comes to just gameplay, I do prefer Dragon's Dogma more. I love the gameplay from Baldur's Gate 3. Again, I've never been one for turn-based strategy games, and Baldur's Gate 3 was good enough to pull me onto that game and keep me there from start to finish, and has brought me back multiple times. But I love the action that Dragon's Dogma has. I do just have to ask the question, guys, what if it could have had co-op? I'm just saying, I would have loved that. Probably would have created some confusion in terms of main quest line, sure, but just running around slaying together? Absolutely. Now, another cool aspect that I want to bring up that Capcom has given us in this game is something called Dragon's Plague. Now, this is cool, guys. This is an illness that your pawn can contract while fighting a drake or a dragon. Not only that, you can actually accidentally hire another player's pawn that has the sickness in their world. Now, unlike other debilitations inside of Dragon's Dogma, Dragon's Plague cannot be cured. This disease also doesn't appear in the status menu of your pawns, which makes you wonder, Cross, how do you detect such a thing? And why would we want to detect such a thing? If you ignore this disease for too long, essentially what happens is your pawn will transform into a shadowy dragon when the player rests at an inn. And when that happens, they literally nuke the entire town or city that inn is in, which, by the way, kills every NPC. Dude, this stuff is wild. You can actually see the gameplay right here. This didn't happen to me, but it's crazy if this happens. And it will say Dragon's Plague has struck, leaving a trail of innocent lives in its wake. And the pawn that brought the illness into the world has essentially just been returned beyond the rift. And as you begin to walk around, you see everyone is dead. Now look, I don't know to what extent this would mess up one's storyline, but I gotta say, guys, it is a bold move for Capcom to have such a mechanic. You want to nuke an entire city, have someone with Dragon's Plague, go stay at their inn, boom, everybody dies. But Cross, can't I just load my save? Oh, my naive soul. This is one thing that some of you are either gonna love or absolutely hate. Fellas, this game is constantly saving, and secondly, you cannot save scum. Now maybe you may be able to Alt F4 at the moment Dragon's Plague strikes and restart before that moment, but because the game saves so fast after these situations, you really can't go back. Honestly, the save system is kind of a nightmare. Some people like it because, yes, it means your decisions do have consequences, since what happens, and now it's like literally concrete. Others just become annoyed with the save system because you actually get two options to save. You can save, and you can load a save from that save point, or you can load a save from the last time you slept in an inn. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because this problem hit me, and it was terrible. You see, I came across this merchant that wanted this gem. I thought I was pulling a fast one. I proceeded to take that gem, and instead of giving him the real one, I forged a new one. I proceeded to give him the forged gem. Thinking I was a smart man, he suddenly looked at me and said, hey, we're gonna walk just across town here and see if this is actually authentic. He proceeds to take me to the same exact person who I also forged the gem with. I begged for this guy to pull me a solid and say that it was in fact the authentic real deal. He proceeded to say, you gotta give me money. He then proceeds to take all of my money, and then upon taking all of my money says, hey, yeah, I'm not gonna help you out. This item is forged. The merchant at that moment flips out on me. I lose any potential quest line with them. Game over. Now, in this moment, I was mad, and I did what any other honorable knight would do. I proceeded to pull out my sword and proceeded to lay waste to all these people. Now, in this moment, I realized that I was giving in to my frustration, and therefore, I needed to load my save. Here's where I messed up. First up, I loaded the save of me staying in an inn instead of the save that I should have loaded, which was my last manual save. Unfortunately, the last time I had actually stayed in an inn was 4 or 5 hours before. When it loaded me into the game, everything for the past 4 or 5 hours had been erased. I proceeded to close out the game again, reopen it, try to load the save that I previously had, and lo and behold, that save from the end had become my new save. Therefore, there was no way for me to recoup those last 4 to 5 hours. Now, are there ways There's still save scum out there. Yes, there's manager mods that allows you to actually do these saves on your PC. But the point is, whether intentional or not, this save system in the game really locks you in to you playing one time all the way through, and whatever happens, happens. And if you want any changes, you gotta play it again. Now, this of course probably gives value to New Game Plus, which we're gonna talk about in just a moment after we talk about the ending to this game. Again, heavy spoilers going into this final section. But back to the point on the save thing. Yes, I know I mentioned earlier that there wasn't really any major consequences for our actions inside of Dragon's Dogma. Now, that's not to say that there isn't any consequences. To me, the consequences are just like a hard cutoff. It's not necessarily like, okay, because of my decision to offer this forged jade to this merchant, instead of this lion guy at the front of the village, neither one of these are gonna bring me along for some crazy quest line. What it really does is just give you more gold. You take the fake Jadeite orb, you give it to Lion Guy, and then you take the real one and you give it to the merchant. And this just nets you more gold. And that's it. There's nothing crazy that branches off from this. And there's also no like morality system where Lion Guy here, half a year later, finds out the Jadeite orb that you gave him was a fake, and he proceeds to try to hunt you down and assassinate you. Now, some of you may be saying, that's crazy, Cross. Why would that even happen? But look, man, that's RPGs, baby. That's the kind of stuff we love. Now, before we get into New Game Plus, I do want to touch back on the story, and most notably, how this game ends. Now, there are 3 endings. Some will say 4. I'll leave it up for interpretation. But there's the bad ending, there's the good ending, and then there's the true ending. Now, the bad ending is the moment here where you actually face the dragon. Instead of you fighting the dragon, turn around like a little bitch and you run. That's the bad ending. Literally, the dragon is like, yeah, run along now. Go be a little bitch. Continue to stay in the cycle. The good ending is you defeat the dragon and you then accept the throne. Now, this one really confused me because I'm like, really? Is that it? Did we just beat the game? And I'm sitting around all these people. Suddenly, I see Weird Guy. Now, this is Weird Guy, aka the Watcher. What does he do? He watches you like a damn weirdo. You interact with him and suddenly you find yourself, after a couple of dialogue lines, back on top of the dragon yet again, waiting to do the fight all over. Now, guys, you do this over and over. Or, while you are on top of the dragon, you can go in your inventory, pull out thy God's Bane blade, and proceed to stab your own heart. And this is where things get crazy. See, the moment you do this is when everything breaks and the cycle is no longer. And this is how you enter the end of times. Now, I've called this a lot of things. I've called it Endgame, the end of times. Really, it's called World Unchosen, but it's the apocalypse, if you couldn't tell by now. But in this world, you are on a timer. Eventually, a red fog will eat up the map, forcing you to then summon the dragon again to then return to the normal world. Now, seeing this ending will force you to enter New Game Plus. Now, throughout this world, you'll be going to those little portals that I told you about. You'll interact with them, you'll fight some baddies, and it's some really cool boss fights. And dude, they give a ton of rewards. Also, everything in this world is just much harder. Some of the best armor literally drops from just killing certain bosses in this world. I killed a Chimera and dropped literally the best chess piece in the game for me. Now, how the game ends, I'm still kind of confused about, guys. It almost felt like it was trying to have a moment similar to like Tears of the Kingdom, where Zelda becomes the dragon. She had been waiting for you for like 1,000 years or something. Link and her team up. Dude, it's an incredible ending. Dragon's Dogma tried to have that same scenario where your main pawn becomes a dragon. You both race up to this dragon. You essentially just have to survive. And then your pawn sacrifices itself to expose the heart, and you plunge the blade into the dragon, thus breaking the cycle for good. And one of the last lines is, oblivion fades, this tale's end has been unwritten. Essentially, by using the empowered God's Blame blade on the dragon's heart, this unshackles the world from the cycle of the arisen, thus returning it to its pre-calamity state. The sky becomes blue again, the ocean comes back, you get your throne with a lot of bitches. No, that doesn't happen. No, you just get New Game Plus. Now, the lore surrounding this is pretty good, although I don't think the game lays it out that well. But from IGN's article here, there are infinite worlds that are constantly being eaten up by Oblivion. The same Oblivion we see consuming the world Unchosen at the end of the game. Some powerful force or god known as the Great Will chose to save these worlds by creating the dragon, a powerful creature that can stave off Oblivion. The Great Will then decided the dragon's power needed to be kept in check, and so it created the Arisen, a humanoid hero of sorts who will hunt and kill the dragon. That's why throughout the game, every time you see the dragon, they're all talking really dirty to you, like, hey man, it's about time you got here. I've been waiting on you. Yes, show me how strong you are. Kinky stuff, dude, but that's why. You were meant to slay the dragons. Now, after some time, a new dragon will appear, then a new arisen, so on, so forth forever. And this cycle gives the world purpose, saving it from becoming unchosen. By stabbing yourself with the empowered God's Bane blade, you refuse the cycle and allow the world to slip into chaos. As a red fog eats up the world, you have no choice but to summon the dragon and unwrite the world's end, setting the story back on track. So essentially, you mess things up because you wanted to go get some loot and experience the game in the end of times. And then you set things back right by doing what you initially were supposed to do to begin with. But that's the whole reason why pawns exist, to keep you on this cycle. The question is, does this set up anything for the future? I don't know. I would be down for it. I really would. Or Dragon's Dogma? Sure. But this also takes me to New Game Plus. Now listen, New Game Plus is different in a lot of different games, but for me, New Game Plus is supposed to have some level of scaling. It's like, hey, all right, you just took all these materials you've created and collected in the previous version of this game, and now you're about to go into this next version of the game. Everything's gonna be scaled higher, more difficult, all that good stuff. And things like your vocations carry over, your items all carry over storage. Unfortunately, you'll have to do the tutorial again, but outside of that, that, you can access storage right afterwards and gain all of your items. And funny enough, you actually get an option to completely change your character if you want to rock a completely different look for both yourself and your main pawn. Now, I think the idea of New Game Plus inside of Dragon's Dogma is just to give you an opportunity to explore different storylines. Maybe you made some decisions, maybe you killed someone you weren't supposed to kill. But as far as I've experienced, no, nothing scales differently here. Like, enemies are not harder, no new enemy types appear. But the only thing that really changes is, yes, you do get to keep your vocations, your skills, and your gear. But outside of that, the map completely reveals itself. And that is essentially all I have seen from the base game to New Game Plus. So the question is, should you rush to get to New Game Plus? No, not in this game, guys. There's nothing crazy here. Like, it's not like Starfield, for my folks that did like Starfield, where you had like alternate endings every time you hit New Game Plus. In my opinion, the best way to play Dragon's Dogma 2 is literally just do everything in your first run. Unless something comes out in the next few days, that's just how I would play Dragon's Dogma. Hit every side quest, take your time, go from city to settlement, literally exploring everything up and down, and just take your time, guys. If there's one thing I would say it has in common with games like Skyrim, is that you kind of want to just savor that main storyline, right? Like, hit everything and work your way up to that main story as like the very last bite. Overall, guys, I've enjoyed playing Dragon's Dogma a ton. I think it's a great game. It's definitely got some flaws, and I felt like the questing could have been better in the game. I felt like the storylines could have been more fleshed out, but the gameplay is solid. The world, beautiful. The enemy variety, amazing. I love that it's a true open world game. The pawn system, I'm a big fan of. So much so that I wish I could play co-op with friends and they can literally join me as my pawn. It seems so perfect here. This game hooked me from start to finish, and it will hook you from start to finish. And if you don't like one vocation because of its combat, there are plenty of others to give a go. Hopefully, Capcom addresses some of the performance issues, because man, is this game worth playing with everything fully maxed out. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.